as I was explaining to Steve, who had asked me about today, the proximate cause for this form is that our other possibilities fell through, and one of the things that people on ARE are ready to do is jump in with something that they have ready to go. Okay, and so anyway, the Popol Vuh, which is the thing I'll focus on today, is I'll just give a history of it, of the text. The earliest copy we have of it, of the text, resides in the Newberry Library at the University of Chicago, and it dates from probably the earlier mid-1700s. Internal evidence tells us that it was probably first written down and then copied over and over again in sometime just before or at 1550. In other words, just after the Spanish conquest of Mexico and Central America. And it is written down in a Romanized, that is, an alphabetic script, as we would recognize it, meaning that the writers of it, it's written in Quiche, which is one of the Mayan languages, but in the Romanized script, which implies that the writers of it were literate in Spanish, had learned Spanish and learned how to read and write Spanish, and then had decided to use these Roman alphabet for their own purposes. This and a few other texts are what survive of the possibly pre-colonial and early colonial periods when Maya culture was still alive in its classical sense, and it's a full coherent text. In printed form, it takes up about 200 pages, and it basically talks about of course, the Mayans have a cyclical concept of time, and so it basically talks about the current creation and how it happened, and then it starts giving the history of human beings from the point of view of the Quiche people, who are one of the prominent Maya lineages from before the conquest. And it would be as if creation is a lot more prominent in this narrative as compared with history. In other words, it would be as if you had the 5 books of the Torah, but the first 2 chapters of Genesis took up, the subject of the first 2 chapters of Genesis took up the first half or even a little bit more, or 3/5 of the entire Torah. And then the rest was the historical and religious part, if just to give a sense of it. So creation is very important. And I think what's fascinating, and I'm only have a dim grasp of this, tenuous grasp. Yeah, dim is not good. A tenuous grasp of this, of how this narrative is extremely central to the thinking and even the daily lives of people who live right now in Central America as we speak. They were able to as happens in a lot of colonial cultures, when Christianity was imposed, a lot of the indigenous cultures figured out ways to use Christianity to the symbols and forms of Christianity to continue their traditional practices. So I'm going to read the first little bit of Dennis Tedlock's translation. Dennis Tedlock lived with the Quiche and actually was initiated as a Quiche shaman. This translation that he did of the Popol Vuh was done in consultation with contemporary Maya shamans, or the Maya, well, at least in the Quiche tradition, call what we would call shamans, call them the mother fathers. Okay, and mother fathers are usually men, but can also be women. The term mother father, I'm not sure exactly what the underlying word in Quiche is, but the term mother father implies the all-giving, encompassing nature of the person who holds that title. And typically, each village in the Quiche highlands, this would be central and western Guatemala, has several people designated as mother fathers, and they have different roles: midwives, matchmakers, what we sometimes translate as toastmasters, which is the convener of banquets and feasts, which is very important, and then something, a diviner, that is what we might recognize as more of a shaman type thing. And so I thought I would read just the opening passage of the Popol Vuh to kind of set us in the mood. So it says, and remember, so these are people who, the catastrophe of the Spanish conquest has happened. Most of their, of the Mayans' written books have been destroyed by the Spanish in huge bonfires, basically by the Inquisition. About half a dozen of them have survived today and are in museums around the world. And within the last 30 years or so, the script has been deciphered. It was considered very, very indecipherable. No one was ever going to figure it out. And then a new generation of anthropologists and scholars from the north, a lot of them centered in UT, had the brilliant idea of, why don't we talk to the people who still live there today? Maybe they could help us. And that was actually kind of what helped finally figure out how to decipher the Maya script. I think there's still a few details to be worked out, but now they can read all the monuments, and they can read all these codexes, that are in libraries and museums around the world. So this is being written just after that cataclysm by people who've clearly been at least attempted to be acculturated into Spanish Catholicism and Spanish culture, and so they're writing. So just bear that in mind as you hear this preface to the writing. This is the beginning of the ancient word. Here in this place called Quiche, here we shall inscribe, we shall implant the ancient word, the potential and source for everything done in the citadel of Quiche, the nation of Quiche people. And here we shall take up the demonstration, revelation, and account of how things are put in shadow and brought to light by the maker, the modeler, named bearer, begetter, Hunapu possum, Hunapu coyote, great white peccary, tapir, sovereign plumed serpent, heart of the lake, heart of the sea, maker of the blue-green plate, maker of the blue-green bowl, as they are called, also named, also described as the midwife, the matchmaker, named Shpiakok, Shmukane, defender, protector, twice a midwife, twice a matchmaker. As is said in the words of Quiché, they accounted for everything and did it too as enlightened beings in enlightened words. We shall write about this now amid the preaching of God in Christendom now. We shall bring it out because there is no longer a place to see it, a council book, a place to see the light that came from across the sea, the account of our place in the shadows, a place to see the dawn of life as it is called. There is the original book, an ancient writing, but he who reads and ponders it hides his face. It takes a long performance and account to complete the emergence of all the sky earth. So that's the beginning. In other words, there's an acknowledgement that we're kind of having to do this in secret, okay? Or this is the way it happened, but okay, we've got this thing called Christianity now, and we have to accommodate with it, okay? And that sense of that breaks through every once in a while in this narration. And at the other end of the book, about 200 and some pages later, when it's gotten into the more historical parts about what's happening between the various kings and leaders of the Maya, it suddenly just sort of almost breaks off and says, and then Tonatiuh came. Tonatiuh was the Aztec nickname, but was used for Pedro Alvarado, who was one of Cortez's lieutenants. Tonatiuh means sun in Nahuatl, in the Aztec language, because Pedro Alvarado was this very fair blonde person, and so he was nicknamed the sun by the Mesoamericans, and that's almost where it ends off. Like, okay, he came, and now things are different, and we don't get into how things are different. So that's a little bit of framing for the whole thing. So I think I'm going to just give the, well, two levels of detail of view. First, I'm going to give the from outer space view, in other words, in about 3 to 5 sentences of what the Popol Vuh is about. And then I'm going to get maybe zoom in to various pieces, and then maybe invite us to talk a little bit about parallels or that we see with things, or I mean anything that occurs to you, of course. So the Popol Vuh is a writing down of the Maya origins story, at least from the point of view of the Quiché Maya. And we don't have this account in other Maya languages. It just might have been written down but didn't get preserved or is yet to be discovered. So the Quiché kind of get to be the ones who tell us what happened. And I think the creation story, at least according to experts in oral narrative and in Maya literature, is apparently pretty common across all the various Maya cultures. But the historical part, of course, as one might imagine, talks about the special place and the triumphal narrative of the Quiché people. So that might be a little different in other Maya cultures. We have creation. We have that gets interrupted. The story, it's very complex narratively. It's not just this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. There's an initial part, and then there's a pause, and it's unclear. This may be a flashback or just in parallel time, where some things have to be kind of arranged, fixed on Earth before true human beings can appear, and we get that, and then we finally get the creation of human beings, and then after human beings come about, we start getting into legendary and then maybe even historical time. where we talk about how, you know, maybe similar to the Tower of Babel. Okay, similar to how the Tower of Babel story goes, and some of the other stories about the peopling of the earth, and then how the various tribes came about, and even why they have different gods, that sort of thing. So, and then finally up to where it's abruptly cut off when the Spanish come. So that's the big overview. That's the outer view from outer space. I'd like to concentrate a little bit, maybe concentrate's the wrong word, but just throw together for you the idea of how creation works. Okay, and creation works in some ways very similarly to the kinds of creation narrative that we're familiar with. One of the big differences is that, as some commentators point out, this is a reflection of Maya culture. Everything is done collectively. You know, it's done through collective discussion and decision. And so at the beginning, we do have this sort of formless, water-filled void, you know, with nothing else. Sounds very similar to the first verse of Genesis. But there, it starts to, and we have a lot of points of contact with how creation happens too in Genesis. However, we have gods, and they're discussing what the best way forward. They've agreed they want to create something, but how we're going to do it and exactly the nature of it, you know, they have to work it out. So they have the big discussion, and when they're agreed, unlike the Judeo-Christian God, they don't even have to talk. It's very explicit. All they had to do was think. They had to think things, and they just started happening. Okay, and so they think land. They think mountains. They think forests. You know, and so so far fairly close to the sequence in the Judeo-Christian creation. However, note one thing: there is no day or night yet. Day or night is going to be the first dawn is going to be the very last thing that happens in creation. In fact, long after the creation of human beings. So we'll get to that later. And this points to, as a lot of you may be familiar with, just the obsessive nature that Central American cultures have with time and with the heavenly bodies, and with, you know, keeping track of them and things. You know, they've got to get it just right, and before we can have a dawn. You know, everything's got to be right, and then we'll have a dawn. And so they get the they get the land created, the mountains, the forests, the trees, all the plants, and then they do something important in Maya astronomy, which is this huge ceiba tree is erected. It's called the world tree, and it's like a tent pole, and it raises the heavens. Okay, and the tent pole is astronomically accurate because it is aligned with the North Pole. You know, the North Pole in the sky, where the North Star is today, and everything revolves around it. And so they're finally able to get the heavens set up, and get the night sky. Excuse me. This is why I didn't want to come in. Okay, would be very scary, I think. So they've got that set up, and then the gods have another discussion. They think, you know, something's missing here. We want someone who can recognize how wonderful our creation is. We want beings who can do that, and more importantly, who can talk to us and praise us and be in relationship with us, and know how, again, this Central American obsession with time, know exactly the right times and seasons to do everything, and to celebrate the, the proper festivals, and do it in a proper way, and doing it at the exact proper time. I mean the Maya had in their pre-Columbian codices, they have the cycle of eclipses, appearances of Venus, Mercury, Mars, and all the other planets. They have explicit rules for figuring all this out and for following the cycles of these things. So they have cycles within cycles within cycles to sync up things like the moon with Venus, the moon with the sun, et cetera, et cetera. And so they're very, very aware of that. And the gods are extremely preoccupied that there be beings who can do this. So they create the animals. Okay, there are, and this is the other thing. These gods, you can argue that the Judeo-Christian God is doing this too, but these gods are definitely very openly learning on the job. So they create the animals, and it lists them, the jaguars, the snakes, the birds, and all the other, it lists a bunch, the deer, lists all these animals, and so the gods get them done and says, okay, talk to us, and the animals just squawk and roar and howl. Reminds me of that song we sometimes sing, all God's critters got a place in a choir. And the gods are very disappointed. These animals clearly, okay, they're trying, but they just can't do it. And so the gods say, okay, when the true beings come along, your job will be to serve them and to provide food for them. Sorry, you're just going to have to let them do that. So that's the first attempt to create human beings. Second attempt to create human beings, they go the Judeo-Christian route. Let's make them out of mud, okay? And so they make them out of mud, but unfortunately, even though the mud dries, it gets wet. They fall apart. They have some attempt at speech, but it's just kind of a hissing, weird, windy sound, and so they just wiped us all away. Nope, mud didn't work. So, third attempt, we'll make them out of wood. So they carve these beings out of wood and then animate them. And these beings actually are able to speak, are able to use the implements of culture. They have houses, and they have tortilla griddles, and they have fire hearths and pots, and dogs and things like that. But apparently these beings are just completely oblivious to the gods. They don't care. They don't care for one, and apparently they don't have fully developed souls, and sort of don't care about all these niceties. And they're a little ham-fisted. They beat the dogs a lot, and they even burn their cooking pots, according to the the cooking pots. So so one fine night, the gods say, we've had enough, and the abused dogs and other domestic animals, and the cooking pots and the other utensils, even their hearthstones on their fire, rise up and attack these beings and drive them out of their houses into the jungle. And these beings are still around. They're the spider monkeys that now live in Central America in the trees, and which is why they can be seen sometimes mocking human beings from the edge of the forest. Okay, at this point, you might think, okay, so what's the next attempt? Well, At this point, the gods realize the world already has some things wrong with it that they have to do to prepare for the true beings that they want. So they create a demigod couple. They're called Shmukani and Shpikayok. I won't worry you with their names, but they're also called first grandfather and first grandmother. And first grandfather and first grandmother, these demigods that the gods have created to help them sort of clean up the world, have a set of twins. And these twins like to play the pre-Columbian Central American ball game. And unfortunately, they play it right over the roof of the underworld, Xibalba. And the lords of the underworld, also known as the lords of death, are annoyed by their ball playing. So they challenge them to a ball game, get them to go down there, and provide a series of trick tests to them. The failure of any of which will be fatal. They do manage to get through a lot, but they finally are bested by and killed by the lords of Xibalba. However, somewhat inadvisedly, the lords of Xibalba hang one of their heads in a calabash tree as like a gourd, and so this gourd, one of the daughters of the underworld walks by, it spits into her hand, and she is impregnated. And so she is cast out in disgrace from the underworld, goes and finds basically her mother-in-law, the mother of the dead twin. And then she, 9 months later, gives birth to another set of twins. To make a long story short, this set of twins does get the job done. They best the lords of death at their own game, even trick two of them into getting killed, and then they dictate terms to the lords of death of the underworld and say, you guys can't just run amok over the surface of the earth. You have to stay down there, and you have to bring death, in normal and expected ways. So that's basically that. And then the other thing that they're called the hero twins typically have to do is, before there can be the first dawning of the sun, there's a problem. There's this being called Seven Macaw who claims to be the sun, but he's not, and he's a very boastful, vain being. So they have to take him down a peg or two. They use their blowguns. He has metal eyes that he claims are the shiny part of the sun, and they have to destroy the metal eyes and break his teeth. So at that point, they've done a lot of work for the gods. So they actually ascend to the heavens, or actually go into the earth, because they still haven't come up. They're planted as seeds, and they will later become the sun and the moon. Wow, that was more detail than I wanted to get into. but okay. But now we get, that was kind of a parenthesis as a prelude to the actual creation of human beings. So the gods are sitting around saying, we just haven't found the right material for human beings. We had these 3 previous, attempts to create these beings who are aware and can talk to us and can praise us. What are we going to do? And then a couple of the animals go off and they say, hey, we found this mountain that has all good things growing on it. And there is this white and yellow corn growing on these mountains. And they look at the white and yellow corn, and the gods say, that's the ticket. That's what we need. And so they give the corn to first grandmother. And first grandmother grinds the corn, and then she makes, what we call masa out of the corn. And they make some corn liquor, and they kind of infuse that with it. That becomes blood. And they create actual human beings, us, out of corn. So in most Central American viewpoint, human beings are made out of corn, which makes a lot of sense if you know a lot about Central America. And so they don't just create a guy and a gal. They create 4 men out of corn, the first 4 men, and then they while the men sleep, so echoes of Genesis. While the men sleep, they take not ribs, they take heart of reeds and make 4 women for them, and then they all sleep together. When they wake up, they're all very happy, and so the first thing the gods do is they look at the humans and they say, "So what do you think?" And the humans say, "This is amazing. Thank you. This world, us, it's great." And so the gods are very happy. They have beings that can praise them, that are aware, that can speak in coherent language. Now there's one little problem. The gods realize they've done too good a job. They start talking to the human beings and realize the human beings can see everything, everywhere, and can understand anything. And the gods are like, this is a little bit too much of a challenge to our power. So what they do is, it says that they dim their sight and cloud their understanding so that they can only see what's immediate to them and only understand immediate things. And only have imaginations as opposed to actually know about the future. So with that, but the human beings are unfazed and they still think the gods are really great. And and then at this point, we start going into the more historical narratives about, yeah.
How do you go to the bathroom? You go to the bathroom?
No, we're still talking here. Okay. So we go into talking about, so humanity starts multiplying again. Remember, there has not been a day yet. We are still in sort of this twilight zone. Okay, and everybody knows that there's going to be a dawn. Everybody longs for this dawn, but they just don't know what they have to do to help it happen. So all of humanity goes to this place called the 7 Caves. We think it might be associated with a site north of Mexico City, Teotihuacan. Some of you may know about it, which is this huge, ancient, abandoned complex of pyramids and other things. They all go there and they receive instruction, and they differentiate into groups, and each group receives its own gods, its own name, and then they, at that point, similar to the Tower of Babel story, there's confusion of languages, and human beings no longer understand each other. And the Quiche, and they name other tribes, get assigned different places according to where their gods are. Apparently their gods, and this may be some coming in from the awareness of the Spanish conquest, the gods asked to be hidden in the jungles, so they do. And high Maya culture, with all those pyramids and those statues and things, only actually ended a few hundred years before the Spanish came. And although there were still, it was still a high Maya civilization, they apparently weren't living in these places like Chichen Itza, and then that we think of. They were already starting to be overgrown by the jungle. So, this is my speculation. Maybe the gods asking to be hidden, was in preparation for the coming of the Spanish. Um, uh, and then, so a bunch of other things happen. And finally, the dawn comes. And everybody's overjoyed, except the sun has some unexpected, I think they have to fine tune it. It's a little hot. It turns a lot of the gods into stone. And once again, you see this idea that they know that there are these stone statues out in the jungle, but it's not part of their everyday experience anymore. One or two of the gods, the trickster, or one or two of the trickster gods, are managed to hide out in the jungle from the sun, and so it says they are still not stone. They're still out there running around doing things. And I guess that's a lot of talking. I don't like to just talk on and on and on in forums when I'm in charge of them. But that's kind of an overview. I've given short shrift to the historical part because it's a lot of names of tribes and rulers and things like that. Be similar to reviewing the Book of Chronicles, in the Hebrew Bible, so I'll kind of leave off at that. But I'm just going to stop talking for a while, and see what anyone wants to make of this, either just as a reaction to the thing itself, or maybe as a thought about where things are, how things might compare, how that might compare with your feeling about other creation stories you're familiar with, including scientific creation stories, I guess. So I'll be quiet and we'll let people speak as led.
Howard, this is Sarah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I was just thinking about the Mayan creation stories, and it seems like the gods have more humility than the Judeo-Christian God, because they're willing to make all these failed attempts and like try to get counsel on how to make things work. And they had the stick people, the mud people, so on and so forth. I just think that's interesting. That's my main observation.
I think that's one of my big takeaways. I mean, if, you know, when I'm at the 10,000 or above foot view, the one thing I take away is the gods had to try 4 times, you know, before they got it right. And even maybe even 4.5, because they did a little too good a job the 4th time. Yeah. And I see it's, I guess I talked longer than I thought I would, but if folks are interested, I'll just refer you back to the chat. Steve kindly posted a link to a very nice talk by Edgar Garcia, professor of creative writing and English at University of Chicago, who specializes in indigenous, comparison of indigenous and other, like, I've seen his course list. You know, he has a course where they look at Beowulf, the Odyssey, the Lakota, the Navajo, and the Maya, you know, stories. So some very interesting stuff, and, and a very thoughtful, beautiful collection of essays that he wrote on the Popol Vuh just within the last year. And one of which he reads in this link that Steve put up. And just so everyone's got it there in clear text, in case you're interested in ever following up on it, it's the Popol Vuh, Popol-Vuh, and the translation that pretty much everyone uses now is the one by Dennis Tedlock, Tedlock, if you're interested. So I'll leave it at that. I think our time. Thanks. Unless there are some parting comments, I'm going to go mute. And thanks, Sarah. That's very much along the lines of what I think about it too. But I'll go mute, and I guess we'll wait for worship to start.